What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another episode of Lions Latest, where we go through the latest Detroit Lions news. And today, we are taking our first look at the Detroit Lions off-season program. Today, we're talking about Detroit Lions rookie minicamp and the updates we have so far, which players have stuck out, where guys are lining up, even jersey numbers for free agent additions and rookie draft picks. Now, these aren't set in stone, but they're here, as well as notes from press conferences of the Lions' new additions and Dan Campbell, who it's been a minute that we've heard from. And finally, there has been a player that had a tryout with the Detroit Lions during rookie minicamp that has been signed to a contract, so he'll have an opportunity to continue to compete throughout the offseason programs in a position that seems to be a little bit up in the air right now. So let's get it started.
The city's been down and it found a way to get up. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. We're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to our video. Glad you guys are here, and we are back with another episode of Lions Latest, man. And this is exciting because we're getting into the offseason programs, and while we don't have the most takeaways from this, we're not able to see this as the general public. We can't go to rookie minicamp, but we do have some notes from it, as well as mainly getting to hear from these rookies. You get to hear, okay, where they're lining up defensively. You got a guy that's signing a contract with the Lions. That's exciting. And Dan Campbell met with the media, and it's been a minute since he's met with the media. Also, Brad Helms was on the Rich Eisen show, which I'm pretty sure me and Rad are going to discuss, so I won't do that in today's video, but look forward for that to come out at some point. But let's just dive right into this. Let's start with what Dan Campbell did say when he spoke with the media. He addressed the schedule. He talked about joint practices, all of those things. So we'll start there, then we'll get into some of the rookie minicamp notes that we have so far, as well as some clips. Hey, the Lions social media team, okay, they put out some fire clips. I like that. They got the players doing videos of themselves. It's pretty sweet so far. But anyways, let's talk about what Dan Campbell had to say. Let's start with the joint practices update. So last season, the Detroit Lions didn't have any practices, and Dan Campbell admitted that he waited too long. A lot of teams already had these scheduled, so the Lions didn't get any joint practices scheduled last offseason. But he learned from that, and this upcoming year, we will have joint practices, according to Dan Campbell, which will take place with the Indianapolis Colts before week 2 of the preseason in Indianapolis. So the Lions will have joint practices this offseason. He said it kind of breaks up training camp a little bit, but it also brings in that competition where you're facing another team, not just kind of facing yourself like the Lions did all last training camp. So that is one new addition this offseason that we did not have last year that Dan Campbell has announced so far. Now, when you take a look at our rookies, Jameson Williams and James Mitchell specifically, both of those guys are recovering from ACL injuries. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about Jameson when we get to the Brad Holmes side. We don't really know what it is. He doesn't necessarily know what it is. We'll just have to see how it goes as we work our way closer to the season. But Dan Campbell had updates on both these guys, saying that, both of them have been watching off to the side. We've seen Jameson Williams. He's been carrying around a football in every single video. Apparently, everywhere he's been carrying around this football. He's brought great energy off to the side, and he's stayed really engaged, according to Dan Campbell, where you ask him a question, he has the answer to it. He's been very engaged off to the side. He said the only thing he's been able to do so far, Jameson said, is the jugs machine. So he's been trying to get involved a little bit. He seems to be in great spirits. It's awesome to see, especially after all the craziness that was being said when we selected him. Point is, looks in great spirits. He loved the energy that he seems to have. And same things with James Mitchell. Both these guys kind of watching off the sideline. Now, James Mitchell is hoping to be back by training camp and ready to go and start competing by training camp. So his timeline could be a lot quicker than Jameson Williams, as James Mitchell's ACL injury took place in week 2 of this past year at Virginia Tech versus Jameson Williams, which took place at the end of the season last year for Alabama. So there's a pretty big difference there. So we may see James Mitchell back on the field sooner than we see Jameson Williams. That seems to be what it's like. But for right now, both these guys are off to the side, kind of recovering and staying involved that way. Dan Campbell explained that this week was basically trying to get these rookies basically acclimated to the scheme that they're going to run, try to get them a little bit of an intro to the scheme. Some of these players have talked about emphasizing the focus on wanting to learn the playbook. I think that was James Houston that brought that up, like really learning the playbook, understanding it. And that is kind of the period right now that Dan Campbell said they're in. They are getting them out there. Of course, they're not wearing pads. They're going through some drills. They're working some 7-on-7. But as we know that through this, it's only the players that were going through tryouts or the rookies. I mean, that's all that it was. So this year, the Lions actually had a quarterback, which was Connor Sampson. We got some clips from that. Really don't have much news from it, but it was Connor Sampson Samson. Last year, we didn't even have a quarterback. We had a coach throwing passes. Speaking of the offensive side of the ball, Dan Campbell did say that the main change that they are looking for offensively this season specifically is the ability to change tempo. Now, one thing that I thought he brought up that was very important and maybe a little bit under the radar is what he said, we want to be more efficient in and out of the huddle, which kind of transitioned him into the, changing of tempo, but more efficient in and out of the huddle. Basically, he wants to have things where it's like, hey, there's one word, one call. That way it's a lot quicker and more efficient. We had a lot of change going on last season with who's calling plays. Dan Campbell takes over calling plays. Ben Johnson stepping into a bigger role. We had a lot of moving pieces last season, and this year he wants it to be much more efficient where they can change pace. They can go to no huddle. They can get up to the line quicker. They can slow it down. They can change pace. And basically he says this, we want to be able to do anything that we want to do. We don't want to be limited. We want to be able to put that stress on defense. He said the only reason we should be limited offensively this year is maybe because this player is not great in this area or this player is good in this area. Like this is his skill set, but we don't want to be limited because of ourselves. And I thought that was very important because last year we had multiple times where it happened where we would have a delay of game. We wouldn't get the call through. Sometimes that was headset malfunctions, whatever it was. We had issues with that where we weren't always getting the call through. We were late to get up to the line, and he wants that to not be a thing this next season, which I'm all for, and the ability to change up that tempo, go into some no huddle, play a little bit quicker, slow it down, just open up everything for the offense. Speaking of that, he had a quote that, a lot of people have been kind of taking to, and this is when he said, we're trying to avoid floaters. Basically, the guys are just happy that they were drafted or that they were signed or whatever it may be. They're just happy that they're there, and that's it. He said, we want to avoid those guys. We want guys that love football. Now, this has been something that's, been said many times by Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, that they want those guys that just love football. Actually, I was going back and I was rewatching Brad Holmes' introductory presser with the Detroit Lions, and one thing that he said in his introductory presser was, one thing that I can't basically overlook is passion for the game. That's one of those things where it's like, hey, you have to have this. You have to have this for us to bring you in. So kind of just following along with that, we don't want floaters. And from what I could tell, none of our guys look like they're going to be that for the Lions. From James Houston to Aiden Hutchinson, none of these guys look like they're going to be floaters on this team, which is good. It's a good thing to have. Now let's go back to the defense side of the ball. Let's talk a little bit about Aiden Hutchinson. Of course, he was asked about Hutchinson. This is what he said. He said, he's everything we're about. It just so happened that he was in our backyard. It just so happened that he was from Michigan. You're picked that high in the draft, you better fit everything that you're looking for. Now, we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the Brad Holmes side, when he starts to talk to Rich Eisen, because I think he broke it down in terms of how they may look to utilize him, what he reminded Brad Holmes of. Speaking of being in Michigan, because we have seen a lot of the Lions tryouts or UDFA signs, a lot of these guys have connections, or in the past they were in Michigan or they played in Michigan. From the outside looking in, but they do understand a little bit of the organization just because of where they're from. Also, they understand the weather. They understand the area. Okay, he said this didn't necessarily mean like, okay, they're from Michigan, only signed those guys, but it didn't hurt that they were also from Michigan.
There may be a little bit more level of pride to it, potentially, with those guys, because it is kind of home base. And so I don't think you just pick guys because of that. However, man, if they line up and you're looking for a jump ball, you'll take that jump ball. I would. And
that was something I noted. I was like looking at the schools. I'm like, all these schools are in Michigan. What the heck is going on here? So maybe that did play into it. It seems to have played into it a little bit. He did give us an answer that we have been waiting for, Dan Campbell, about calling plays. We're like, okay, who's calling plays? Is it Dan Campbell? Is it Ben Johnson? Well, this is what he said. He said, I'll promise you this. Okay, here we go. I'll promise you this. If I don't call plays, Ben Johnson will. All right, so it didn't really give us the answer at all there, but that's what he said. So there you go. You can narrow it down to two options. A 50-50 shot, flip a coin. It's going to be one of the two guys. And that has been getting the most attention from his presser is what Dan Campbell said about basically not having primetime games. Brian Holmes also brought this up. We don't have any primetime games outside of the Thanksgiving game. But Campbell said this, I love that we have all 1 p.m. games. There's no short weeks. There's no, hey, you get back to your hotel late and it feels like you lost a day. And he said basically after week 5, games can be flexed. Who's to say we can't be flexed? Now, usually teams that get flexed are within big games. I mean, usually that seems to be how it goes down. It's like, okay, if this is a big game, playoff aspirations, if it's one that's going to draw attention, we may flex this to a different spot in the schedule just to get more eyes on this game. So hopefully that is the case, or maybe we're playing so darn well and it's like, hey, we got to flex the Lions game here because this game is going to get some attention because they've been balling early in the season. That would be outstanding. After the bye week, we get some games flexed because our first 5 games, then we have the bye week. Maybe that's the case. Who knows? He said, Who's to say we can't be flexed? But he loves the fact that all the games are at 1 p.m. And I get that for sure from a coaching perspective and also probably from a player perspective, that all games are at 1. Basically, every game is on Sunday, aside from Thanksgiving, which is on Thursday. Every other game is basically the exact same schedule throughout the season, assuming that they don't get flexed. I can see from a coach and player's perspective how they would like that, because coaches, and we've heard Dan Campbell talk about this last year, the short weeks, how much it really changes up your schedule. Game on Thursday, it really throws off the normal practice week that you have, because now basically you're not putting in much work. It's pretty much just walkthroughs, and then you're trying to install a game plan, but it can be a little bit shorter because you're trying to install that game plan, I guess, usually midweek during a normal week. But now that you're playing on Thursday, you're trying to install this game plan a day before you play. But Wednesday sometimes can be travel day. To add on to that, the Detroit Lions don't travel much this season. They had the second lowest amount of travel distance this year. So, I mean, this could absolutely be a good thing for Dan Campbell and the players. I think the primetime thing is definitely for the fans, though, and there is something about getting that primetime spot, and it was very seemingly disrespectful that the Detroit Lions got no primetime games, right? It was kind of like, come on, man, this is more of a fan thing than a player-coach thing. I'm sure the players and coach loves it, but for the fans, it's like, come on, man, really? I mean, everybody else got one but us? Come on now. I get we did Thanksgiving, but really, come on, man. But anyways, Dan Campbell likes 1 p.m. games, which makes sense from a players and coaches perspective. I'm sure they do like that. I don't know, players might like to have some of the night games. You know, I know it throws it up a little bit because it's like, okay, we don't get to our room at the same time. We're getting back at probably, 1 in the morning. But they may like that because it does just feel different when you play at night. Either way, Lions don't have it. And I guess a primetime game is after 5 p.m. I think that's what constitutes a primetime game, is if it starts after 5. Let's start with that tryout news for the Detroit Lions in this year's rookie minicamp. This is pretty exciting. So you have a player that comes in to try out for the Detroit Lions, but this is not like a lot of your tryouts. This is not a rookie this season. This is a player that's been in the league for 3 years now, spent time with the LA Rams and the Denver Broncos. Originally, he was signed as an undrafted free agent by the LA Rams coming out of the 2019 draft from the Georgia Bulldogs. Spent 2 years there, played a majority of the snaps on special teams, had 16 defensive snaps. Then this past season, picked up by the Denver Broncos. He was claimed by the Denver Broncos, but they don't get to see him in action because of an off-season practice injury that he was carted off the field. He landed on IR for the entire season. And now here he is for the Detroit Lions, gets an opportunity to come in for a tryout. Like we said, originally he was picked up by the Rams, so we know Brad Holmes was there. Comes in for a tryout to compete with some of these rookies, the Malcolm Rodriguez's, the James Houston. And apparently he must have done enough, or Brad Holmes liked him enough to give him a contract, waive someone on the roster to make a spot, and now have an opportunity to compete against the veterans in this position, which we have a lot of names, but we're not sure who's actually going to make the roster here when you look at a lot of these players in this specific group, between the Sean Dean Hamiltons, the Jared Davis, the Chris Boards. The list kind of goes on and on at that position. James Houston, Malcolm Rodriguez, we expect both those guys to make the roster, but now he has an opportunity to compete with some of these, you could call it veterans, on this Detroit Lions group as we move past rookie minicamp. That is Natrez Patrick. Hopefully I'm saying the guy's name right. Natrez Patrick, a 24-year-old linebacker out of Georgia that brings some size to the unit, a unit where we brought in some undersized players at 6'3", 242 pounds. In terms of his relative athletic score, definitely does not test out in the same, way that James Houston or Malcolm Rodriguez did in terms of the 40 time, which he actually didn't have a 40 time. It was just a calculation. But just in general, the athletic scores didn't test out as well, but the size tested out much better than a lot of linebackers that we brought in so far at 6'3", 242. Had a very interesting career at Georgia because he was pretty darn rotational, didn't put up a lot of production there because every other drive it seemed like he was coming off the field, even in his final year with Georgia. Had some off the field issues, marijuana usage that had him suspended for 4 games. You had a misdemeanor drug charge that had him suspended for their playoff game at Georgia. I guess a bowl game you would basically say in college. So he had some of those issues in terms of off the field, which is probably a big reason that he went drafted to pair with the production, which wasn't great because he was pretty rotational, played there for a while, but the production wasn't great in terms of a year-by-year thing. And now here he is with the Detroit Lions, as the Detroit Lions have waived edge rusher Jesse Lemonnier. Now that's very interesting, and I'm sure we'll dive into this more, but when you do look at the Lions defensive line, because they said they're going to run more 4-man fronts, even though Aaron Glenn's like, yeah, that's a little overrated, we're just going to basically play 2-hour guys straight strengths and what we find out is the best for these players that we now have on the roster. And I completely agree with that. We're so early, putting labels on it is kind of tough. But when you do look at the defensive line, I think this is a good sign for Austin Bryant. I will say that guy that had a breakout season, 4.5 sacks, 31 total tackles, 10 pressures, showed some pass rush upside last season, finally was pretty healthy. But I think it's a good sign for those guys. When you look at our defensive line, you're like, okay, how many players will the Lions may keep here? We've seen the Rams keep 11, 12 guys in this unit in the past. If you look at the defensive line as a whole, maybe the Lions keep 9, 10, 11 guys in that unit. The Aiden Hutchinsons, the Romeo Okwara's, the Julian Okwara's, the Josh Pascals, the Levi's, the Aleem McNeil's, the Michael Brockers. Those 7 kind of feel like locks. Then you have the Austin Bryants. You have the John Penicinis. You have the Bruce Hectors. You have the Jayshon Cornells. You have the Demetrius Taylors. So you have a nice little mix there. And now you have a guy like Jesse Lemonnier, who is no longer here. He has been waived. Now, he could, of course, be picked up at some point. He showed up a few times last season. He was a pickup from the Los Angeles Chargers before the season started as a depth pass rusher that had a little bit towards the end of the season. However, if you run more four-man fronts defensively, it's understandable why the Lions maybe don't need a guy like Jesse Lemonnier for depth because of what they're going to be doing schematically this upcoming season. So now they have this guy in Natrez Patrick being signed as a linebacker to compete, and immediately from watching him, first off, obviously he's playing at Georgia, he made me think of a guy like Channing Tindall. Just by the way that he moves like a Channing Tindall, seriously. It's just this whole style that he has going on there. But immediately watching, it didn't take long to kind of see maybe the vision of how this player could fit within the Lions defense. Now, of course, schematically, stylistically, you can understand why he spent time with both the Rams and the Denver Broncos, why the Broncos brought him in. You look at the kind of linebackers that the Broncos bring in. He has a very similar build to a Baron Browning with kind of the athleticism closer to a Josie Jewell, right? Just that kind of build within that defense. And of course, the LA Rams, right? They drafted Ernest Jones in the 3rd round. A lot of teams were looking at like, hey, he's not that high of a talent because he's not the most athletic linebacker and test out the best, but they draft him in the 3rd round and he can handle a little bit more of that strong side linebacker role. And that's where I think Natrez Patrick, from the film that I've watched so far out of Georgia in a couple of games for 2018, is probably where he'll compete for a role. And I would think he would compete for that strong side linebacker role with the likes of a Jared Davis, possibly a James Houston. We'll see how they utilize him. But the Lions seem to have the linebackers that give you a little bit more coverage upside, a little bit smaller, a little bit more athletic between Malcolm Rodriguez, between Chris Board, between James Houston and Alex Anzalone. Now you have a guy like Natrez Patrick, who I think can come in and compete for possibly a strong side linebacker, a depth strong side linebacker. And of course, when they go to a 4-2-5, maybe compete for that type of role as well. More of an early down player seemingly, but can be used in coverage situations. He was kind of known as the leader of that defense. And even though he was rotational, he was like a vocal leader, very smart, very instinctive linebacker within that defense. And from the games that I watched, there's a couple things that I really like. First off, he has good arm length at 33 inches, which could allow him to hold up on the strong side of the field, which is where he played at Georgia as well. You see some of that length and strength that he's able to utilize at the point of attack when the ball is ran his direction. He shows the ability to be aggressive, but also kind of dial it back and play patient when they're asked to play a little bit more read and react, when he's a little bit more patient working downhill as a run defender like a play like this. See how early he gets on top of this run and he fills the lane? And then when the ball is ran away from him, you also see him being a little bit more aggressive, crashing downhill, shooting gaps, things like that. He's a little bit bigger built, which would suit him well for playing like a strong side linebacker role that could hold up with tight ends, possibly in underneath coverage. Now, he doesn't really seem to have the athleticism to really stick with a lot of guys in man coverage, but some of these bigger tight ends, specifically working in line, not really lining out as a receiver or running back side of the backfield, that's where he could be utilized. The guy that was utilized in coverage at Georgia, even though he's rotational, he wasn't only an early down player. He was used in sub packages at times there. I wouldn't say you want him to get a ton of zone depth, but definitely can play underneath. Probably will limit some of his coverage ability because he doesn't seem to have that fluid agility and to change directions. More of a straight line downhill player. He can show up when tackling, but he's had to adapt some of that controlled patience. Was utilized to cover and chase running backs out of the backfield, bump and run tight ends off the line of scrimmage. So I definitely see a Sam linebacker type of fit, which gives us something different, much different than what a lot of players are bringing right now currently that we have brought in this offseason to the linebacker room. He gives you a different style defensively, but still the same attacking, aggressive player. He seemed to definitely have issues tackling. Now, I saw some plays like this where I like how he gets to a spot. This ball's going to be ran away from him, but it's almost like he doesn't break down before the tackle. He kind of just flies by. With that being said, this was 2018, which is now 4 years ago, so he may not look exactly like this right now. He for sure had a lot of missed tackles, but you see the effort when players ran away from him. Definitely moves a lot faster than what the athletic scores show because he's pretty darn instinctive. It's just showing that aggressiveness downhill, the fearlessness to just run through blockers, which could give him some upside as a pass rusher. All that being said about Patrick playing the off-ball linebacker position, when I did go look at his film from 2019 in the preseason, you don't get the all 22 of it, which is whack. But when I looked at some of his 2019 with the LA Rams, specifically in the preseason when we got to see him in their 3-4 defense that they were playing, he played as an outside linebacker, usually on the strong side. So basically he was up on the line of scrimmage, and then when they went to sub packages, they would push him at defensive end, play his hand in the dirt, and allow him to rush the quarterback. Now, he didn't look like a pure defensive end. It seemed a lot of his pass rush tried to come through stunts, but you did see the power at the point of attack, specifically when he worked against tight ends against the run. So I think it speaks even more to his ability to play as a strong side Sam type of linebacker that possibly could walk up on the line of scrimmage, because he has done that with the LA Rams. So even when you look at a Jesse Lemonier, this guy has rushed the passer from a basically like a pure pass rusher type of role on pass downs, or so winning towards the inside, showing agility, utilization on stunts, swim moves, and just kind of that crazy effort to get to the quarterback. It just seemed like his motor never died. I mean, he was just getting after it. So I think you also saw some flexibility when he was with the LA Rams. We're hearing that he's, being used as an off-ball linebacker so far in rookie minicamp, but definitely some flexibility with how they utilized him, which could, again, even make Jesse Lemonier another guy that's even more expendable. We're going to continue to break this down as we go through our players, but just when you take a look at then a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, right, and you hear Brad Holmes talk about him and how, in 2020, the guy's playing like a 3-4 defensive end, and you see with the LA Rams and some of their disciples, the Brandon Staley's coming from LA, and how they kind of run their 3-4 style of defense. So I do believe the Lions will be more 4-down fronts, but it is that flexibility to change based on what you have and what fits the player's strengths. We have seen Hutchinson play as a 3-4 defensive end, so I just thought I'd throw it out there, or he possibly could play a stand-up role in that same defense, but it's going to be flexible. That's the point, is it seems like it's going to be a flexible defensive front like it was last season, but specifically a couple things will be what we know. One gapping, get downhill type of style defensively. We seem to know that that's going to be the Lions' identity defensively. And it seemed like when they put him closer to the line, it did sort of minimize some of the missed tackles and things like that, because he was so close to the line of scrimmage. He just got to play with power downhill, utilize his agility to try to, utilize stunts, but less so of having to tackle in space or break down and make tackles. So I get vibes of the Ernest Jones. I get vibes of that size where he just brings something different than what we have right now to this group. And in those early situations, if you're in a 4-3 defense and you're like, who could play Sam for us? This guy could possibly fill into that role, and that's why I see him competing with the likes of a Jared Davis, who is now wearing the number 40 again. He brings a little bit of experience to a relatively young linebacker room. So no guarantee that he makes the team, but I can understand why the Lions would do this, because he does bring a little bit of a different element, kind of brought the opposite in so far this offseason. So a lot of names in that group, just a lot of competition that's going to be taking place in that positional group. Before we get into some of those notes, I first want to throw up some of the numbers that they have put out so far. Now, these are not set in stone specifically for these rookie picks. These can be subject to change. You listen to a guy like Jamison Williams talking about, hey, I may rock with the number 18. He said number 1, Jeff Okuda's wearing the number 1, so, he doesn't have the number 1. But he said he may rock with number 18. He chose that number, at least for practice, even though he's not practicing right now, because Randy Moss was his favorite receiver, and Randy Moss at one point wore the number 18, he said. And then also Kelvin Johnson was 81, so he's like, I'll just flip it around and wear the number 18. But you see Aiden Hutchinson rock number 97. It seems like he'll be wearing that during the season. I spelled Hutchinson wrong. You guys can't tell. I'm going to fix that right now. How do I spell Hutchinson wrong? What are we doing here? Aiden Hutchinson rocked number 97. It was Nick Williams' number, so he should be able to have that number. That's fire. Deshaun Hand was 93, but now it's Joshua Pascal. I love that as well. You also have Kirby Joseph rocking the 31. James Mitchell wearing 82. Malcolm Rodriguez, the number 44. That's a mean linebacker number. I like that. James Houston with 59 and Chase Lucas with 36. Then on the right, Lucas with 36. Then on the right side, we have free agent updates. I gotta believe these are more set in stone, with DJ Chark wearing the number 4. He's coming from wearing the number 17, now number 4. Deshaun Elliott, number 5. I love that for the style that he plays with. Seems like a Deshaun Elliott, powerful hitter type of number. Mike Hughes rocking the number 23, which Jeff Okuda was last season, but now Jeff Okuda's number 1, which I know I'm saying I like it, but Jeff Okuda, I love the fact that he's going back to number 1. He's changed his number every year so far in the NFL. Hopefully he's able to stay healthy, but I like it. Bring it back to the roots. Bring it back to Ohio State, the top draft pick, number 1. I love that. Jared Davis gets number 40 back from when he was originally with the Lions. It's changed up a little bit since then. Chris Board, number 49. Pretty sure that's what he wore last season with Baltimore. And Garrett Griffin, 86. Pretty sure that's what he wore last season with the Saints. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. So those are some of the number leaks that they've given us so far. When you watch some of these videos that they put out with Rookie Minicamp, I can't always tell who the player is because some of them are undrafted. I don't exactly know what their numbers are. I'm like, okay, who is that? I'm trying to figure out who it is, but I can't really tell from the angles that they give us. I don't know who it is, but I can try to make some guesses on who the player may be. However, let's take a couple notes here. Let's start with Malcolm Rodriguez. Malcolm Rodriguez was talking about him being a former safety. Of course, he brought up the wrestling side, which we talked about in his video. Shout out to everyone that's checked that video out. If you haven't yet, we did a breakdown on Malcolm Rodriguez, but he brought up the fact that he is a former safety coming out of high school, a guy that really bulked up through high school as a wrestler, finished second as a runner-up for the wrestling championship. He said that motivated him. He put on like 30 pounds of muscle, and then of course he won multiple state championships in wrestling. But he comes out of high school, goes to Oklahoma State, basically just around like 200 pounds. So he starts off originally as a safety, then gets to about 230, bumps down to playing linebacker position. If it's him specifically in coverage, also you saw some nice hands in one of the clips that the Lions put up there. Hey, now look, this guy's got coverage ability. Okay, I talked about being limited in terms of basically build and size and some of the matchups, but definitely moves his hips really well. How fluid of a mover he was, which gives him that zone upside. You saw the pick against Notre Dame. They did talk about the wrestling side and how it helps him, kind of get through angles, get himself small, take on some of those blockers. You see it all. Look, the guy's naturally going to be a very good linebacker. I think naturally he just has the feel for the linebacker position and the athleticism for the linebacker position. Not to say, well, it's 40 time. He is great 40 time, but just athletically, the flexibility they have just seems to fit really well for that position. And even Dan Campbell went on to say, look, I mean, the guy looks the part, and he's pretty smart, which we expected when we brought him in. Kirby Joseph, apparently he was taking a few slot reps at Rookie Minicamp, and that's one thing that he said. He's like, look, I mean, I want to be versatile. I want to be a guy that never comes off the field. Know the fact that he's probably going to be playing safety, like a free safety role for us, but he's like, I want to be a guy that never comes off. So if that means, you can slide me to nickel in certain packages, maybe you put me at cornerback, jokingly, but I want to be that versatile guy. Last season, that was Will Harris. He was super versatile for us, but that's what Kirby Joseph is aiming for. Now, Kirby probably just needs more reps at the safety position. I mean, it's just, going to come down to a lot of just getting more opportunities. And he said, Aaron Glenn, Aubrey Pleasant, they'll kind of get me right in that area, but he's like, I'm a pro. I mean, I love the confidence that he's like, I'm a pro, but he probably will just need more reps. But you do immediately see it. The first game I watched of Kirby Joseph, was it Penn State? I don't know if it was Penn State. Either way, first game I watched of Kirby Joseph, I think it was Penn State. You're just like, whoa, look how well he moves, how low he moves, how fluid he opens up. And it's like, man, the off-man coverage upside is legitimate here. Where on pass downs like Lions last year, you blitz your linebackers, you ask him to play off-man coverage on a tight end. He has the wingspan, the length to easily do that. But then you just see how fluid he is as a mover, which is going to give him big upside coming down on plays, playing off-man coverage on third down. That kind of upside to be a versatile piece. So even though he still needs more reps, more opportunities, which he's going to continue to get, I see flexibility there where, yeah, the man coverage ability has some legitimate upside. And the Lions have shown this past season that they need their safeties to be able to do that. The guy played 69 snaps in 2020. He played 219 snaps in 2019. But in 2021, he broke out statistically, but he also played 700 plus snaps that year. So for him, it's just about reps. With James Houston, he basically focused on the fact that he's going to be a guy that's disruptive in the backfield. He's like, I want to be a dynamic player. He brought up forced fumbles, interceptions, that kind of thing. For the reports that I've seen, he's been working mostly off-ball linebacker with the Lions so far in Rookie Minicamp. Things can change, but that's how the Lions are utilizing him. I think that's a good fit for him just because of his build to play like an off-ball. But a guy that he says, I want to win inside, I want to win outside. A guy that can pass rush on sub packages. He's on the field. You let him get after the quarterback. What's his strength? Get after the quarterback. Simple as that. But a downhill off-ball linebacker, I think that's where he could stand out. He also has that connection with Malcolm Rodriguez at the NFLPA where they both played together. And he was like, man, I was watching film and I was like, man, we look good together. I love this mindset. He's like, I want to make the team. I love this. He's like, I want to make the team. I mean, of course, priority is going to be special teams, but however that is, I want to make that 53-man roster. I also brought up the fact that he has hooked up with Darius Leonard a little bit because they're both to the same agent, but after hearing that answer, I just immediately wrote down, I'm like, okay, he's not a floater, okay? This is not one of those floaters that Dan Campbell was talking about that they don't want, so I'm like, that's good. But James Houston, another one of those guys where I was like, man, I don't know how much he's going to play this rookie season, which is why possibly bringing in a guy like Natrez Patrick could help him get some developmental time depending on how Lions want to use him, but I do see James Houston as having the ability to play off the weak side or the strong side. Apparently, he made some plays in 7-on-7s, one time on a of blitz, which I think will, if he's on the field, he'll be utilized a lot to do. Also, he had a near interception in one of the 7-on-7. So it's awesome to see that. I think this guy needs time, but he also needs experience as playing as a, one gapping style downhill off-ball linebacker. When they started utilizing him like that, and you also saw it in his bowl game, you also saw it in the East and West Shrine Bowl, you're like, oh, wow, there's a lot of potential here. And we also did a video on this player as well. Khalil Pimpleton, who's been getting a lot of hype, one of our UDFA signings, wide receiver out of Central Michigan. He's only 5'7", 170, but from when we talked about him in that rookie minicamp video, which I think is worth still checking out if you skip to when we talk about the players each, because we go through pretty much every rookie player. We talked about Khalil Pimpleton, and it was like, oh my goodness, yes, he is smaller, so you expect him to be shiftier, you expect him to be really tough to cover one-on-one, which has shown up so far from the clips they have given us. You saw the one where he basically breaks number 35, and you can see it, just the speed that he has off the line. We took a look at Pimpleton in our rookie minicamp preview, and you can just see, man, the guy explodes off the line of scrimmage. I like how he sells this as well. Look at how he uses his head here to turn this cornerback and then cut outside. I love that. One thing about Khalil is he just gets up to speed really quickly, and this cornerback got caught trailing very quickly, and you don't want to be in that situation one-on-one with a guy like Pimpleton. I still do have some very legitimate questions about his hands, as you can see here, but that was a nice route. Khalil Pimpleton, just that nasty top-end speed, gets him to flip his hips, then he just stops on a dime, gets back to the ball. Again, Khalil Frame was dominating like this in one-on-ones in training camp. So these smaller receivers, I just think it's really tough to match up with these smaller, shifty guys one-on-one in coverage like this. I'm not sure who this cornerback is. After further examination, I believe it was Cedric Boswell out of Miami of Ohio that was in coverage on this play. Biggest thing here is, though, watch the catch at the end. You even saw it on the drag that he ran where he's blowing by guys. I have some questions about his pass catching technique. I will say that he was fearless when attacking the middle of the field, so he can be utilized as a movement piece off the line of scrimmage, catch it over the middle, play fearless in that way. He's got the speed. To me, he's more of a make you miss kind of guy with the ball in his hands than Khalif Raymond is, so that's one big difference that he brings. A little bit smaller than Khalif. Khalif, I like Khalif because he can play slot outside. He can step up for you. He can be a pretty reliable pass catcher, can run routes really well, but he doesn't have as much get the ball in your hands, make you miss, kind of that thing behind the line of scrimmage threat as Khalil Pimpleton is. When you give Khalil Pimpleton, Khalif and Khalil, that's kind of weird. If you give Pimpleton the ball behind the line of scrimmage, he might make something shake. He might make you miss in space. That's a big difference. I noticed there's also possibly return upside for sure. Now, the big thing is, though, Khalif Raymond returned the ball well last season, but Pimpleton gives you a little bit more make you miss, I think, as a runner with the ball in his hands. Made his mark a little bit early. And what's cool is you got guys like Connor Sampson who got to work one-on-one with Mark Brunell because he was the only quarterback, and Greg Bell got to work one-on-one with Deuce Staley, the UDFA signing, because he was the only running back. So that's kind of a cool little note to throw in there. I mean, aside from that, obviously Hutchinson has gotten a lot of the video attention. He just looks good. Hutchinson is just incredibly agile for a guy at his size. It's super impressive. Curious to see how they use him on pass downs, obvious pass situations, because I think he could be bumped in the interior, stand up, or as you see, doing a lot of hand in the dirt work. And then, of course, look at the, just look how he throws his power into this. Bang! I mean, I love that. Just his entire torso. I mean, he's been doing a lot of hand in the dirt work, seemingly so far. Didn't see a lot of stand-up videos that they sent out there. I mean, we'll see how the Lions utilize him. I'm sure they're going to try to use him to his strength. So if his strength is stand up, we'll stand him up. If he's put his hand in the dirt, we'll put his hand in the dirt. But just a little sneak peek, we'll talk about this more. But from what Brad Holmes said, they liked him early. When you look at his college career, he reminded him of a Chris Long because he's more of a, maybe more of a 3-4 defensive end. He's more projected to play edge than anything because he's utilized a lot more in the interior of a defensive line. But then you see him in his final year at Michigan, and they put him on the edge, and he goes for 14 sacks. You're like, oh my gosh, he literally can do this too? Like, this is ridiculous versatility. So Lions could use him more in the interior than we anticipate. Maybe they push him in a lot more than we think. Maybe on sub downs they push him inside. I think that could make a lot of sense based on his skill set. Maybe they use him in a stand-up role. I'll have to watch the film. We'll get to him eventually when we go through these film breakdowns because I really want to check out some of that 2019 film and stuff like that. But it is something that's worth mentioning. He seemingly has done a lot of his drills with his hand in the dirt, which wouldn't surprise me either if he plays like a pure defensive end, hand in the dirt, and goes to work that way. Either way works for me. I think he's going to be good. He's powerful. He's explosive. He's agile as heck. I think he's going to have a lot of upside potential here wherever you put the guy on the field because, again, he's not a floater. Little note about Jamison Williams. I like this, too. Jamison's not really involved, but like I said, he's been carrying around that football seemingly everywhere. Seems to be in great spirits. He's not, upset that he can't get out there because he understands the situation. They're not really, rushing it. They're not really sure when it's going to happen. They said they're just going to trust the process and not try to put a certain date when he's going to be back. So he just accepts that, understands the situation, but he's walking around with the football everywhere. Everywhere, seemingly, from what I've heard, from what I've seen, he's just walking around with that ball in his hands. I like that. Don't lose that football. I like that. Walk around with the ball, and he's a lion. You know, he's a fierce player. He's a fierce competitor. He can compete on special teams. He'll hit. It's like, how many receivers doing that at his size? So Jameson, they kind of have an idea or kind of like a process or plan that they came in with about how this was going to go, how the rehab was going to go, how he was going to improve, and they're just kind of sticking to that course right now, but not really putting a date on it. It has to be this time. It's just kind of a plan or a guy that they're kind of going with. I'm sure that's kind of the area that they're in right now, not rushing it back. I do want to throw in a little note here with DJ Chark. I know it really doesn't have to do with rookie minicamp necessarily, but we did get to hear from the vets, Deshaun Elliott, DJ Chark, Jamal Williams. I like what Jamal Williams said, man. Jamal Williams was honest. He was like, look, last year, of course, we had a lot of moving pieces. We were kind of figuring out. But this year, I mean, you have your kind of base, right? You have your foundation at pretty much every position. I was even talking about this with Red. Every position kind of has that foundation where the offensive line, of course, but even defensively, right? You have a defensive line. You have the Aleems, the Levi's, the Brockers. At linebacker, you have the Alexanders, the Loneys, the Derek Barnes. At safety, you have the T-Walks. At cornerback, you have basically everybody the same. You have that at pretty much every position, but then you just added on top of that, right? You just added talent to those positions and you try to improve those positions. Like Jamal Williams was saying, it almost kind of feels like we're into this a lot faster this season, right? You have the same head coach. You have now your offensive coordinator, your defensive coordinator. It feels like you're kind of jumping into this season a lot quicker. You're looking to get out to a lot of a hotter start, and you're just like, okay, now we have the tools. We have the, the pieces to improve us and help our roster in these certain areas, but you still have that foundation that you kind of laid last season. It's just kind of like go right now. But with DJ Chark, I did have a little note I want to throw in here. So he was talking about how Ben Johnson, because, Ben Johnson's doing his own thing with the offense now. He's starting to install that, his own way. There's a couple things that have carried over for last season, but apparently it's kind of like his new thing about how he wanted to have this offense look. We also know that we brought in an offensive-minded coach from the New Orleans Saints a while back. We did a video on that, so I'm sure there's maybe some impact there as well. You guys remember that. Shout out to you. But with DJ Chark, he was talking about how offensively, Ben Johnson, he likes it because he's being utilized in more areas right now where you kind of have to, know slot. You have to know every different position offensively because he's moving you around, putting you in different spots, kind of versus when he was in Jacksonville where he was more of a backside player that had seemingly a sort of limited route tree. And it kind of was like that when you watched his film, even though you saw that, yeah, he can run some routes now, but he would run like big routes, 9 routes. He brought it up like that, like kind of just playing like the backside receiver. But now with Ben Johnson, so far at least, he's been using him in a lot of different positions, moving them around. You have to understand and know different positions, but it's just a lot of different route variety that he's going to be able to run. The DJ Chark, he seemed to be super excited when he got out of Jacksonville and signed here, and it sounds like that's the case now. And we saw the movements last season, right? Like the St. Browns last season. Josh Reynolds kind of just stuck at the outside, but that's because we didn't have an outside receiver, and I'm sure he'll kind of stick there. But guys that can move around, play different spots, put that threat on a defense that you can move around. You're going to have to be able to guard him at multiple positions, not just one, right? You can't just stick here and, hey, he's always going to line up here. You're going to either have to follow with that cornerback or someone else is going to have to line up on him. So that makes the defense forced to adjust, right? Forced to approach you differently when you're being pushed around in different positions, and a receiver can still be very impactful from those different spots. Those are the main notes that I wanted to hit on there. We'll keep you guys updated. We're going to talk about Brad Holmes soon. We're going to talk about what he said on the Rich Eisen show because I thought he gave some really good insight on a lot of things with Goff, with Jameson, with Hutch. All that stuff is coming soon. But for now, those are the notes that we have for Rookie Minicamp. We'll keep it updated as the Lions will now start to get the veterans in the building and compete with all of those guys, which should be very fun. Let me know your thoughts, comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.